Let's go to this conversation now. In the latest installment of the Zulu Royal battle, Queen Sibongile Dlamini-Zulu has lost her bid to amend her court papers. The Queen wanted to amend her court papers to ask for an order that the late King Goodwill Zwelithini Bhekuzulu's customary marriages to his other 5 wives be nullified. Acting KwaZulu-Natal Judge President Isaac Madondo said the Queen did not advance reasonable reasons to amend her court papers. Let's look at the implications of this decision and other issues with Mpumelelo Zikalala, who's a Director of Zikalala Attorneys and is also a legal analyst. Kuzeni, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. I wonder, yesterday we saw, contradictions being laid bare by the court when it comes to the papers of the Queen. And also now today, she doesn't really manage to get that right or the permission to be able to amend her papers. Things, one would say, from where we are sitting as we're watching as members of the public, things aren't seemingly going as planned for her and her legal team. I wonder, what implications will this have on this matter going forward?
Certainly, but the most important matter is this one. What type of relief are you looking for to the court, the effectiveness of that particular relief in terms of the interest that you want to protect? The initial application that she has made, the Queen simply says, I want you to declare my marriage as a civil marriage. I'm not responding, or I'm not going to touch the validity of any other marriages. But at a later stage, at the 11th hour when the matter is about to be argued, then she comes back and says, but you must also declare the marriages of the other queens as invalid. And then the court says, but you can't do that because they haven't been given an opportunity to respond adequately, to provide their evidence, and to respond in a manner in which you ought to respond when you have this type of matters. And to say that you must allow that now simply means that we have to then re-invite them to submit affidavits so that when the matter is ventilated, it is ventilated when you've got all the views and the submissions of all the other queens. It's too late of a time now. The amount of credit issues going to be suffered by the queens and all the other royal family members, it is too much. Deal with the whole matter as it stands now, which then moved to the goalpost from declaring her own marriage and other marriages as invalid to simply saying, just declare my own one. It has dire consequences when it comes to a matter because the court is going to simply move and say, at the end of the day, why do you want me to declare something in a vacuum, which is what the arguments of the respondents and also the advocate from, I think it was Cockta was saying that there's no need for you to declare your marriage as a civil marriage. There's no one who has disputed this particular fact, and it can come back at a later stage. Why do you feel the need to declare it now? One may even think that she is now preparing for a later dispute that may arise when the interpretation of the will comes up, when the administration or the distribution of the assets left by the late king are then being distributed, in which they will then say, I've passed this hurdle of proving that my marriage was a civil one, so give me my 50% so that I'm able to deal with it in a manner in which I need to deal it with. But another thing which must be noted when it comes to this particular matter, the way in which our courts deal with the entry points of marriages and deals with the manner in which the distribution of assets or the estate of an individual is done at a later stage is completely different. When the time comes to distribute the asset, the estate comes in. Our courts have adopted a more liberal manner in terms of the interpretation and the manner in which things must be done by simply saying, because you did not dispute the validity of the marriage while the main person or the common denominator was alive, we are also going to protect the interest of all the wives that are there. If you look at the recent case of Sitole versus Chole, the other case which came out on the 31st of December in the court, the one thing which has been said by the court consistently is that we are going to defend the rights of the other individuals in the particular marriage. In this case, it is the interest of the other wives which are there. So it may be that at the end of the day, the Queen may not be successful depending on how the court seeks to interpret this particular application in declaring her own civil marriage as the only which must survive.
So now, when one then looks and listens at what you're saying, if I may borrow from her papers, because one of the things that she talks about is that at the heart of my case, when the late Isilo chose and agreed to marry me in terms of civil marriage, he agreed to the legal consequences of such a marriage, one which was to preclude the late Isilo from forming a polygamous establishment. She is, when you read this and other paragraphs that are contained in her papers, she paints a picture of a wife, if I may put it that way, who really didn't have much of a say in this particular arrangement. But others, Khuzeni, may argue that her silence over the years, because her marriage spans over 4 decades, that it may have been, viewed as consent. So as you say, then, it looks like even this argument may fall away to say that this is what, they had agreed to, because the courts or even the law may argue that why didn't she bring this to the courts sooner while Isilo was alive?
Definitely, when the dispute or the trigger that started this non-compliance with what she alleges was agreed to took place, why didn't you move forward at that particular stage? Because at that particular stage, the main person or the main player in this particular process would have been able to come to her aid and either agree with her or simply say, because you have an issue, let's divorce and you go your separate way and I'll go mine, because I want to engage in this particular process. Not only then, there are then actions which are taken over by the Queen, in which she sort of accepts that there are other wives which are going to be here. One would imagine there must have been ceremonies where all the wives would be invited. They would sit in one table, maybe share a meal, other cultural activities that would have been there, either events they would have been invited to, in which she would come, as well as the other wives would also be there. Now, why dispute it at this particular stage? But the most important thing which was asked by the court is, there's no one who's disputing your civil marriage. Why are you coming with the civil marriage now? It may be premature for you to raise this dispute. Wait up until there's a dispute and then come to us. We will be able to offer assistance to you.
All right, so Khuzeni, we'll continue to unpack, these particular developments, because I don't think this is the last we hear of this matter. But thank you so much for your time. We'll have to pause there. That was Mpumelelo Zikalala. He's the Director of Zikalala Attorneys, as well as a legal analyst.